Hi everyone, welcome to Active Self-Protection. We are delighted that you're here today for today's evidence-based defensive lesson. I am ASP President John Correa.
And I am Stephanie Widener, ASP's CEO. Welcome to Saturday's lesson.
MagTech is the only freedom seed I use on the range. I personally have over 100,000 rounds downrange of MagTech, and it's unbelievably reliable, very accurate, and a great value. Pick some up for your next range trip wherever you shop for range supplies. This first one is out of Houston, Texas, and you see this guy walk into this store. He is going to grab a bag in the store and then start filling it full of product in the store and try to walk out. Well, the employee takes umbrage with that, and she's not gonna let him out and push him around a little bit, grab a hold of that bag and take it back from him. Well, he's not real happy about that. And he's like, hey, give me back my bag full of stuff I've stolen from you. And she tells him to get out. Now, he's gonna show her like his cell phone or something, or like a fake badge. And she doesn't buy that. She's like, no, dude, get out of my store. Is joined by another employee to say, get out of the store. They're gonna finally push him out of the store, but when he gets frustrated about that, he is going to raise up, and the clerk that's closest to him here, he's gonna pick up a fist and punch her in the face really hard on his way out the door. The second one's out of New Orleans, and you see this guy's got like 160 pounds of dog food on a cart and decides he's going to just yoink it and walk out the store. Well, the female employee says, no, sir, you need to pay for that dog food, and the guy's gonna get frustrated. He's not having it for that, so then she starts removing the dog food and saying, no, sir, you can't take all 160 pounds of this dog food. Then he's gonna try to pick a couple of them up because he can hand carry like 80 pounds of it. So she knocks the cart over, and now they're in a tug of war. Well, that brings the male employee around who's gonna see what's going on as she's trying to snag the dog food back from him. And again, our guy's got 2 bags of dog food there, so our male employee's like, yeah, whatever, I'm gonna go get my phone. He grabs his cell phone while the guy jumps in his car, and she, the female employee, is gonna go and thankfully lock the door. They are not gonna catch this guy. Thankfully, nobody was hurt in either one badly. Hey friends, if you haven't watched any of Stephanie Widener's full-length classes in the ASP Unlimited app, I think you're missing out. Man, people are getting awful bold in this day and age, Steph. And you know, this guy comes in and he just decides, yeah, you know, I'm just gonna rob this place. I'm just gonna steal a bunch of things. Now this is theft originally, but recognize that as soon as she says no, and she has every right in the world to stop the theft of property with ordinary force. And she does, give me that back. When he resists that, this is no longer a theft. Now it is a robbery because you're using force or the threat of force. And so that raises things up a little bit. And in most of the country, you can absolutely use ordinary force to stop a robbery. It has to get to be an armed robbery or an aggravated robbery before you can use deadly force. But here, this one's in Houston, the great state of Texas. You can stop a robbery with deadly force too, though I don't think a gun was the right answer here even there.
Yeah, I really don't either for a whole lot of reasons. But yeah, for anybody that's not familiar, ordinary force is anything like just using physical power of some kind to stop them, telling them to stop, or you're able to kind of get in a bit of a shoving match, a fist fight with them to stop them. That would be ordinary force, or even something up to OC spray or something like that. Pepper spray would be ordinary force. But yeah, as he starts shoving her, this escalates at least enough for Houston to where you could use deadly force if you want to. I would agree. I'm not sure she has the capabilities to, even if she wanted to, just because she doesn't seem to have the skills here to do that.
Yeah, recognize that's Texas unique, right? So if you're in Texas, Texas Penal Code 9.42 allows the use of deadly force to stop a robbery in progress. The rest of the country, you use deadly force to stop a robbery, you're probably going to face charges for using a disproportionate amount of force. So I want to be very cautious with that kind of advice. Even in Texas, I wouldn't really recommend it. The other thing you said there, Stephanie, that I'm very interested in is, you know, this woman decides she wants to stop it. I honor her for that. Some people are high responders, but you better have something behind that other than your moral outrage, because as we see happens here, this guy's gonna end up punching her in the face. So if you're gonna step in and stop a robbery, you better have attitude and skills and a plan that can back up your moral outrage.
Yep, and as you know, as a middle-aged woman, as a grandma, as you know, I'm very cognizant of the fact that, you know, speaking in big generalities, I'm going to be physically weaker. I'm smaller than most people that would try to attack me. I'm physically weaker than them. So I utilize tools, things like pepper spray, things like firearm to help become an equalizer for that. This woman's kind of rightfully outraged that he's trying to take something, whether it belongs to her as the owner of the store or she's an employee. She wants to stop it, but she doesn't have any tools to help equalize that playing field. And she doesn't seem to have the physical abilities to do so either. So I just don't see a winning path here. So if you are a high responder, someone that is going to jump in like both of these women appear to be aware of that in yourself, and you need some tools to make it worthwhile. You can't stop with just the idea of something being wrong. You have to be able to back that up.
I really believe that. Also, this is a perfect use case for an OC spray. Back up a little bit here. Douse him with the hot sauce, right? So when we talk about blessing the deserving, it's because we want to go across the eyes, and then we want to go from the scalp to the sternum. And doing so then gives him, you know, great amounts of pain. And that will take the starch right out of his jammies about 90% of the time. And give you some distance from him as well. And those force multipliers, again, you use OC spray at threat of ordinary force. If you're like, hey, this guy is pushing me and I'm worried he's gonna punch me, absolutely, now's the time to OC spray him. Not when he actively is, but because she stayed close to him and pushed him out because she decided I'm gonna push him out with my hands instead of pushing him out with pain, not injury, with pain, then he rears up and punches her in the face. Now, Steph, I think this is one you're kind of uniquely qualified to talk about, that I think a lot of times people think, aha, you have a man attacking a woman, so therefore she has enough disparity of force to justify the use of deadly force here in other states. But man, what we see in real cases here means that's not always going to hold.
Yeah, it's really one of those kind of unique things that, you know, I have the opportunity to be working on 2 expert witness cases right now where we have victims that were one was female and they're much smaller. There's a huge size and strength disparity between themselves and the attacker, and they are just not getting the type of understanding through the legal system for that. So it leaves me really, I think we should all be much more hesitant about saying what we should do as far as lethal force. And you really want to get to that, must I? Do I have to use a firearm here to defend myself? If so, then do. But it makes me really hesitant for these kind of gray areas, even when the law technically justifies it. It's just in real self-defense encounters, we're not always seeing it play out the way you think it should on paper. And that's a lot. And you know, as a woman, I've been able to live my whole life not being beat up by other people, which is great. I think sometimes, though, that leads to this false sense of confidence that you won't get punched in the face, because an awful lot of people aren't willing to punch a woman in the face or use physical force against a woman. That's clearly not the case here. And as a smaller, weaker person, you can be at really pretty high risk. A punch in the face certainly isn't deadly force, but it's much more risk than staying back and using OC. She could get a broken nose here, lose some teeth, get knocked down to the ground and hit her head on something and provide some real pain and problems for her later. So being able to stay several feet back and using OC at much less risk to yourself is a huge benefit over trying to go hands-on with someone that is physically stronger than you with no skills.
Yeah, and I'm backing up and again mentioning that Stephanie and Carrie Dudenhofer are working on a couple of these cases right now. You know, hopefully we'll be able to help those ladies to show the jury and that they were at risk of deadly harm because of the size disparities and because of the testosterone disparities and those things. But it's certainly not a guarantee. So again, at least multiple factors of disparity is what I would use. And again, go back to that must I. And here, just stay out of the guy's range. You know, when you feel like, oh, I've got to get in here and push him, you put yourself at risk and at range of his fists. And he's bigger than you and stronger than you and can do you great harm if you do that. Far better to get a little standoff and OC spray the guy. Simple as that. It's one of the reasons that if you're not going to be a martial artist, I would strongly recommend that you have those kinds of tools on you for these kinds of problems. Same thing here with this lady in New Orleans. And again, I really honor high responders, Steph. And some ladies, you know, we think of this thing, oh, ladies are demure and they are, you know, shy and those things. Not all of them for sure. And this woman's like, no, and she has every right to be morally outraged here.
And frankly, we see all kinds of videos where women strongly prevail, whether they're the law enforcement officers, whether they're the civilian victim. They have the skills, they have the tools, they have the tactics, attitude, skills, plan, and they do prevail. It's just in these two particular instances, I don't see any evidence that there's any tools to help back up this attitude or hand-to-hand skills to help back up their attitude. So that's what worries me. If you're a high responder like this, you need to have the ability to respond without putting yourself at great risk. And if you don't have those, in both of these cases, there's nothing wrong with letting these guys make off with the company's money. The company is not really worried about whether or not you have headaches for the rest of your life because you've got knocked down to the ground and got a concussion of some kind, and you're going to pay for that for the rest of your life. You know, this is some dog food. You really have to be careful about what you're willing to put your life, your family, your well-being at risk for, even if you're the owner. Jeepers, this is a few co-pays worth of dog food, and you don't know what'll happen if you go hands-on with a guy this big.
Yeah, I also want to say this one's in New Orleans, Louisiana, right? And New Orleans is pretty friendly to self-defense. However, here's my reminder to you to know the laws of your jurisdiction, and not just the way you think they are, and not just the way your buddy who was a cop for a couple of years thinks they are, or who was a cop in the 80s thinks they are, but from reputable sources, the folks who have skin in the game, who have stood in court with people and watch this process play out in your jurisdiction. Because we said the last one, that one was in Houston, Texas. Probably deadly force is not even going to get a look, or get a look from the prosecutor, but not bring charges. But here in Louisiana, you use deadly force here to stop this one, you're probably going to catch charges of aggravated assault if he lives and murder if he dies, because it would be considered disproportionate force. So different states, remember, we are a collection of states and every state has its own laws. Now, the use of force laws, this is just one area that there's a little bit of a distinction. They're usually pretty uniform, but this is why, Steph, I say all the time, you have to know the laws. And unfortunately, we see it in the comments section all the time that people misunderstand the laws, and that can end up catching them charges.
Yeah, I mean, gun laws can get a little more complicated state to state, but like you said, use of force laws are generally pretty similar, except for a few weird spaces like this one. But what I really love is about you, how you kind of broke it down into that can I, should I, must I paradigm, because then the laws become fairly irrelevant, because if you have to, if you're forced to, I must use a firearm to defend myself, or I or someone I love is at great risk of death here, or great bodily harm, serious bodily injury, then you have to, and you deal with the legal consequences later. And then you don't have to worry about the minutia of the law, because in something like this, she certainly doesn't must I need to use a firearm. And the last one, she didn't must I. So you can just avoid a whole bunch of legal entanglements and issues by staying within that must I, regardless of what your local laws are.
I really think that's what a good, sane, sober, moral, prudent person does, is they use a firearm as a tool of last resort only when they must, only when must I, in order to defend my life or the life of somebody who I love. And if that's the case, I don't think there's any state in the union where eventually you're going to be not going to be exonerated, right? So eventually you're going to be exonerated, though again, you can beat the charges. You're not going to beat the ride, right? You might end up getting charged. Hopefully we beat them. Now, she decides to step in there. We're using force here. Another perfect spot here. This guy, hey, I'm grabbing it. He grabs it back. Nope, I just blessed him with the hot sauce. And I think if you give this guy the hot sauce, he probably runs out of the store screaming and hollering and crying. And you don't lose the dog food, and you don't have any risk of physical injury. This is why I love this tool so much. I feel like it's such an underutilized tool, Steph.
Oh, it really is. I mean, how many people do we know that have like lifelong injuries as like law enforcement officers that have been in a lot of physical encounters that, even some of your more minor physical entanglements end up causing serious injuries. So if you can just stand back like 10 feet and take care of this in a very effective way, boy, I don't know why you wouldn't. And when the tool costs a good quality, the best tools out there are within that $10 to $15 range, depending on whether you bulk buy or not. Man, I don't know why you wouldn't. It's such an easy way, especially for a woman like this that, I mean, look at the fight that she has in her. She's just not willing to give up and is trying to find all these fairly creative ways to thwart this robbery. If she could have a tool that would even the playing field and keep her safe, I would be super happy.
Yeah, the other thing that I love about OC spray is that, number one, people will carry an OC spray who would not carry a gun. They're afraid of firearms for a host of reasons, but they won't be afraid of OC spray. Number two, the social stigma of being caught with an OC spray is almost nothing. Number three, you can take it places you can't take a firearm. Right now, I'm not saying you can take it on an airplane, on your carry-on. You can't. You can't take it into a courthouse. You can't take it in those places. But you know, a place that's posted no firearms, an OC spray is not a weapon. And so no big deal, right? You can take that onto a school campus in a lot of places. Now, in some places you can't. Check your local laws. Again, your local laws really matter. But you can take it where you can't take a firearm, and that makes it a useful tool in places where a firearm is just not going to be welcomed. So I think it's a useful tool.
Or for a person, I'm sorry, I was going to say, or for a person like in our previous video that isn't going to be of age to be able to own or use a firearm. If your teens are able to understand the consequences of that sort of thing, I think an OC spray can be a really valuable tool for teens.
Yep. And now I know there's going to be some folks in the comments that are going to be like, well, this guy showed up and how come he didn't come in here and start kung fu fighting and whoop this guy up? Actually, I don't mind at all that he was like, look, man, I'm not getting in a fight over the company's Purina and whatever, dude, you should put that down. No, man, screw that, I'm taking it. All right, homie, I'm calling the cops. And actually, I don't think that's a bad answer here at all.
Yeah, I don't either. She kind of looks at him like she's expecting to have him come in and finish off this fight for her, but I agree. I think he wasn't physically hurting this woman, not physically threatening this woman. At this point, we are still fighting over a couple of bags of dog food, and I think this man not putting himself at risk here is super smart. He came out and looks to me like he's kind of surveying the situation and making a conscious decision to stay out of it. I think it's pretty smart.
Well, and not that it's morally acceptable for him to steal the dog food, okay? I think that it should be a crime to steal things from a business. It should be punishable to do that stuff. It's morally reprehensible to do those things. So, and that's why we were all taught as good, sane, sober, moral, prudent people, right? You know, your mama catch you stealing candy at the liquor store when you were a kid. And not only would you catch a whooping from mom, not saying that's necessarily the right thing, but you'd have to take it back and pay for it and admit what you did and catch all the shame of it too. And I think that if we, you know, brought back some of that public shaming, I'm not saying the whoopings, I'm saying the public shaming though, that may not be a bad thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just trying to juxtapose that against what it could cost these good people to defend the company's dog food, or even if it's their own thing. You know, and I know you know that's what I'm saying. This guy shouldn't be able to steal it. I just want us to be careful about what we're defending and the cost to us to do so.
Like, that's really smart. Now, I do think she did one final thing that I really like, is that the guy gets out of there, she goes over to the door, and instead of chasing him outside or any of that stuff, she simply locks the door. Now, I don't think it would have been wrong necessarily if she goes out to get a license plate number or something like that. However, I think that just locking the door instead, creating a barrier where he can't hurt you and you're safe, I think is a better idea. I think these two videos together, even though they show two negative outcomes, I think they show a lot of great lessons. Please, ladies, hear me, use them. Make sure that you've got some tools on your person. Make sure you know how to use them. If you're a high responder, tune that high response a little bit to do it in a smart way to cover your asp.